Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today, instead of giving a hot take review on the game we just finished playing, we're going to be talking about the games on the Board Game Geek top games of all time list. But we're going to be looking at games number 101 to 200. About 6 or 7 months ago, we did a similar type of analysis on the top 100 games of all time. And we're going to be talking about the games that we're most excited to play that we haven't yet, but we're also going to be talking about the games that just really don't get us excited, that we're not interested in playing. We found it to be a really fun conversation last time and think it'd be fun to explore this a little bit higher list and see how this goes. Before we do that, though, I have some poll results, as I always do. I asked on Twitter and Facebook, our Facebook group this week, how did you meet your game group? And I gave a few answers here, and here's how our listeners and social media followers responded. On Twitter, 15.7% said they met them at a game store or game meetup. That was 18% on Facebook. 13.9% said school, university, or work, and that was 9% on Facebook. 56.6% on Twitter said they got their game group together with existing friends. That was 63% on Facebook. And 13.9% said social media on Twitter, and 10% said Facebook through there. How'd you guys answer this question?
For me, it was kind of a combination because, like you and I, for example, Tim, we were pre-existing friends before we started playing games together. You kind of got me into it. Adam, I got to know because you pulled him into our game group. Here in Portland, where I live now, since I moved, I've actually found that a lot of people that I'm playing games with, I specifically either found out that they were people that I had gotten to know that played games, which I don't even know how I managed to luck into that, or people that I got to know through them. So there was a real heavy game connection to my current social circle here in Portland, which is great.
Yeah, that's really cool. I said existing friends primarily. That's how I met Chris. I game with my brother Steve frequently, but some of my favorite game groups have been people that I already knew and kind of put together. But I've met a decent amount of people through like game meetups as well. And I guess social media, I've made some good friends through Twitter, having to do with this podcast. And even before we started it, so I met some friends there and got a chance to connect with them and play games. But yeah, I think my favorite game groups have always been just people that I like hanging out with and make friends with, and then kind of find out that they're into games or introduce them to games. Recently, one of my neighbors, Rafa down the street, I don't doubt he listens, but if he does, hey, Rafa. But he's been a blast to play with. I talked to him about it one time and he said he'd be interested in trying it. And he's just like, you can see the excitement every time I'm introducing him to these like kind of midweight Euros. We played Beyond the Sun a couple of weeks ago. We played Lost Ruins of Arnak, and he's just getting so enthusiastic and excited. Oh my God, it does that. That's so cool. And it's so fun to watch, but he's also someone I like to hang out with. So yeah, I love pulling friends into it, but I met some decent people through other avenues as well. How about you, Adam?
Well, I initially started going through meetups. There's a few in the Southern California area where I'm at. So I went to a few of those, and then one of those was where I met you, Tim. You've told this story before in the podcast. Like, hey, this guy's not too weird, so maybe I'll invite him over to my place. And I took the bait. I jumped in, and we started playing games. The rest, as they say, is history. So now we had those couple of meetups before COVID struck the world. I don't know, 2 or 3 epic game nights, a couple at your place, Tim, and a couple over at Chris's, I think. And things were amazing. COVID put the clamp down on that, and then we moved to online. So I met you guys online, another group of friends online I was playing with for a while, and now stuff's opening back up, and hopefully I can rekindle some in-person. It wasn't an option on there, but kids, friends, parents from school. That's the plan to be my next game group.
Yeah, that's so funny. Like this New Year's Eve, we didn't have any plans. And so I suggested to my wife, I was like, hey, Gabrielle wants to have some friends over. Why don't we throw like a little New Year's Eve party for her friends at school and their parents, see if anyone's available. And it turned out that like all 6 families were like, yeah, we got kids. We don't have any plans on New Year's Eve. So we invited these 6 families over. We had like 12 or 13 adults there and basically just drank and played code names and Just One. And what else did we play? Anyway, yeah, a couple party games, and they all loved it. They had a blast. So yeah, that's funny how sometimes those kids that the parents you meet through kids can be good friends.
Yeah,
cool. Well, I'm not going to read any replies this week. If you're interested in checking out how some people responded to this, definitely either join our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter at BG_hot takes. Lots of interesting replies here, but we got a little bit longer episode tonight, so I think we're going to just jump right into the episode. This week, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the games that we're interested in and not interested in trying on the BGG 101 to 200 list of games. And this was a fun list for me to look through. Last year we did the top 100 list. And those are all really well-known games or games you hear about or talk about a whole lot. This one was a pretty cool list because there's some pretty neat games on here, but definitely a little bit less, less common, less well-known. And it was fun to explore this one. So do you guys have trouble making this list?
I had a little bit of trouble, and mostly because, like you said, these are not the big marquee games. I mean, I was looking through this list, and I think I had played about 30 of them. So there was a fair number that I was familiar with because I'd actually played them. And there was a few that I knew about, or a bunch that I knew about. But there were plenty on there that I just looked at and go, I've never heard of that game. So I actually had to look into them, look at a couple of the pages if something looked like it had an interesting, box cover or an interesting name. But games that I'd never even heard of until I started really digging into this list a little bit.
I looked and I played about 55 on this list, Chris. So I'd gotten through a little over half of them. But yeah, still a lot of games I'd like to try here. One thing I thought was interesting is that there was a lot more games on this list that I want to play than games I don't want to play. In fact, on the top 100, there were more games that I could have easily added to that don't want to play list. On this one, it was a little tough to get to 5, to be honest. Maybe I could have gotten 6 or 7 there, but most of the games on here that I haven't played, I was kind of interested in or would not mind trying out.
I think I was a little reversed from you, Tim. I have so little time right now. I'm kind of culling in my head already. So I was like, no, not going to bother with this. Not going to move on from this. Move on. So it's not to say that I wouldn't try these games if they were right in front of me, but I thought it was a lot easier to be like, I don't want to try that one, and then just go on to the next one. Finding 5 that I want to play, that was kind of tough too. Actually, there's so many that I do want to play that are in there. There's a geek list that I follow on Board Game Geek. It's called the Top 50 Board Game Statistics or something like that. And it tracks games that were in the top 50, and there's a top 50 Hall of Fame. So if a certain amount of games were in the top 50 for over 50 months, I think they make the Hall of Fame. And a huge chunk of these 100 through 200 games are in that Hall of Fame. So that's kind of a neat list to track and see where those games kind of end up and former number ones and how many times or how many months these games were in the top 50 at certain points in time. That's a fun geek list to follow if you guys don't know about it.
Nice. That's pretty cool. So Chris, why don't you start us off with your number 5? And the way I ordered mine was I went from the highest number in the list, meaning closest to 200, and down to number 101. So I didn't rank these. I'm not going to give it in the list of how much I want to play them. I'm just going to give them in the list of how high they're in the list until we get down to the closest one. You guys can do it however you want to, but Chris, let's go with number 5.
Well, so funny that you should say that, Tim, because that is exactly the same thing that I did.
As any sane person would do.
My number, I don't know how do you list this? My number 5 is number 192 on that list, and it's one that should come as no surprise. It's Radlands by Daniel Piechnik and published by Roxley Games. This is one that has gotten a fair amount of airtime on our show. Adam's talked about it. I've talked about wanting to play it. Never gotten to it yet. I'm hoping that this is maybe one that Adam will bring to Sedona with him, and maybe we can get in a game sometime when everybody else is out, carousing or whatever. Because I'm sick of saying that I want to play this game. I want to actually play the damn game. So that's my number 5.
I was actually really surprised to see Radlands already in the top 200. That's pretty impressive. And I was thinking back as I was looking at this list and saw that there, I was thinking back to how I enjoyed that game. I'd like to play it some more. My number 5 is a dry Euro. Shocker, I know, but I don't have too many of those on my list here. This is sitting at 184, and that is Village. This is by Inca and Marcus Brand. It was published by Stronghold Games, and I believe there is just recently a reprint, maybe on Kickstarter, with a completely new art design with it, which was a little controversial, if I remember right, because the art design is kind of funky. I'm not sure that I like it more than the original, but I think either would be fine to try. This is a worker placement game, and the one thing I know that's unique from a mechanism perspective is that apparently your workers will age and then die. And they literally will go to a graveyard. And I think they turn into like end game points if they go to the graveyard. So you have some reasons to let them die off, to let them go to their eternal slumber. And I think that's an interesting mechanism. But I've heard nothing but good things about Village. Dry theme, kind of a dry production, regardless of which version you get, but still excited to try this. Also, I really like Ink and Marcus Brand's other designs. Rajas of the Ganges is still one of my top games of all time, which is also in this list of 101 to 200, but a game I've already played, so will not be on my list today.
Not that the box has anything to do with anything, but the Village big box on Board Game Geek has a rollicking 2.5 stars. So, oof, man, the game may be good, but don't buy that box.
Interesting. I didn't even know that existed.
Okay, my number 5 at currently 193 on the Board Game Geek top games is a game called Nations. This is from 2013. Designer is, what have I gotten myself into here? Rustin Hackinson, Nina Hackinson, Ina Rosen, and Robert Rosen. And the publisher is Latapelt.fi, the same publisher that does Eclipse, Second Dawn from the Galaxy. Eclipse. So I'm guessing these guys are out of Finland. This is a civilization game. I've heard good things about it. It's been around, since 2013. Hanging strong in that top 200. I hear about it every once in a while. I'm not sure where I hear about it, but it pops up. Everyone says it's a great interactive Civ game, a little heavy. And I'm looking at the components now. Oh man, there looks like a lot of chits and a lot of cards. And maybe I'm having second thoughts about this one. But I've heard so much good about it. I think I would still like to give this one a shot because there's always some diehard fans that say, hey, you got to try Nations. It's still really good. So this is one, yes, I'd like to take a look at. That's Nations from 2013, coming in 193 on the Board Game Geek top games.
If someone says it's still good, you gotta wonder what you're getting yourself into.
Also, when the playtime is listed as 40 to 200 minutes, you gotta wonder what's going on there.
That's a pretty big swing.
90 minutes seems solid. 200, that seems a little on the long side.
Those variable playtimes can be rough sometimes.
Yeah.
So my number 4 game is one that I know is going to be close to Tim's heart. It's number 156. So I'm already jumping up halfway up the list. And it's Magic the Gathering by Richard Garfield and published by Wizards of the Coast. I almost feel like I don't need to say anything about why I want to play this. I mean, this is one of the granddaddies. I love deck building games. I know this is not exactly a deck building game, but I love that style of game. And you've just talked so much about it, Tim. And there's so many things that just seem thrilling. The competition, the head-to-head nature of it, the cool art on the cards. I think you said something about white bordered cards. I'm dying to find out if they're just as offensive in real life as they are when you talk about them. I mean, this just feels like one of those ones that I can't really punch my gamer card until I've played Magic the Gathering. It seems like everybody that I know that plays games was at one point or another a competitive Magic the Gathering player. Like, seriously, it feels like something that I just have to do and get it under my belt, or else how can I possibly be doing a board game podcast? I mean, come on, really?
Well, that's exciting, Chris. I would love to play Magic with you, and I keep thinking about bringing my Magic Cube to one of our conventions and getting you guys into a game or two. I think the challenge is that I can't just like teach you the rules and we jump in and play really easily, because you have to construct a deck, and the way that's the best way to play, in my opinion, is to kind of draft the cards that you're going to play. So you kind of have to teach the whole game, the mechanisms, enough to where you can draft it, and you're not going to get it on the first time. And so it ends up turning into like a weekend experience to actually get the most out of it. And I don't want to waste everybody's time. Maybe I'll bring it, I don't know, maybe we could give it a try. You could at least show you guys a little bit about how it works. But Chris, sometime if you're traveling out in this area or I'm out in your area, maybe we'll get together and duel up for a couple hours. I would love to do that. That'd be so much fun.
Awesome.
Count me in for that weekend. I want to have a magical weekend with all of us together. I'd love to try this one. Didn't make my list, but I'd love to try this one too.
It'll be the magic.
Well, I also jumped way up the list from my last number 184. I jumped all the way up to number 139, and that is Legendary Encounters, an alien deck building game. This is the weirdest one on my list because I don't actually like Legendary that much. I played the Marvel Legendary game a bit, which is a deck building game, a co-op game a weird semi-co-op, whereas you're cooperatively working together, but also you're getting points throughout the game. So after you've defeated all the bad guys, whoever has the most points is, I guess, officially the winner. But Legendary Encounters mixes that up a little bit and adds a little bit of the Nemesis concept in there, or Nemesis adds the alien concept, but that there is potentially a hidden traitor, somebody that's maybe working against you, and only the person who is infected knows that. And my understanding is, I don't know this for sure, but that you can get infected during the course of the game. So you might find out you're infected at a later time. I don't know if that's public information or not, but it just sounds fascinating and thematic. And I didn't think the theme worked at all for Legendary with Marvel. I thought it was kind of a weird theme that they had on there. But with I don't know, aliens, it seems more interesting and fun. So this is a game I'd like to try. I think it's out of print at this point, and I've heard that the production is really odd. Like it uses just a lot of photographs from the movies or something, or maybe poorly done artwork from the movies. So I don't know. This is probably not a game that I would love, but it's a game I'd like to try.
This actually looks like a lot of fun, Tim. I don't know how this one didn't catch my attention when I was going over the list, but I mean, this looks like a blast. And you got to love the tagline. In space, no one can hear you build a deck of marine and weapon cards to fight aliens.
That's awesome. This is one, too, that always crops up. Everyone keeps talking about Legendary. Everyone always says go with Alien.
And shout out to David Rodriguez over at All Games New and Old, where I think Marvel Legendary is like his favorite game of all time. So, David, you'll have to let us know if you ever tried this one and if this compares for you.
He is a dude who loves his IP games. That is for sure.
Yes, he does.
My next game, my number 4 game here is Stone Age. I think this is going to be near and dear to Tim's heart. This is an old school worker placement game. I think I saw it early on when I was looking at board games, and just the game board for this board game is beautiful. If you guys haven't ever seen it, go take a look. It's this rural setting up on the mountainside. There's a creek over on the right that's roaring over this little waterfall, and it's just beautiful. I don't know what about the art, it makes it pop. It really looks 3D. So it's just a very serene, calm looking old school worker placement game that I remember seeing long ago. I never got the chance to play it. So that's Stone Age. The designer is Bernd Brunhofer, the artist Michael Menzel, and the publisher is Hansen Gluck. Published in 2008. So I'm sticking with the retro games here. I think this was a former top 100 as well, maybe way up there at some point. I have no evidence to back that up. I'm just making stuff up, but that's Stone Age.
Hey, and wait, Adam, did you say the name of the game is Stone Age, or it was published in the Stone Ages?
Yeah, right?
I mean, 2008, come on.
This is a really fun game, actually. And I learned to play this because there used to be a digital, like a mobile app for it. And I'd heard about it. So I was like, well, I was just downloading every mobile app I could when I was traveling a lot. And this is actually a really fun game. And it is actually on Board Game Arena. And it's really easy to get into. I taught one of my friends that was, kind of getting into games for the first time. We got in, he got up and started playing right away. So this is a game that's easy to pick up. It's one of the earlier worker placement games, but it does some kind of cool stuff where, like, resource gathering in it, when you go out to collect resources, you put workers out, but instead of just getting a resource for putting a worker, you roll dice, and depending on the rarity of the resource, you get like a different number of that resource based on the pips that are rolled. And so it's kind of a push your luck where you go out to get resources, and then you're also sending workers in the same round to another space to maybe turn those resources into points, like buying things, filling orders or whatever. So if you don't roll the right dice, then you aren't going to get the resources you need to fill the points.
Well, you're making me want to play a lot less.
But there's a breeding hut too, Adam. If you send 2 of your workers to the breeding hut, then you get 1 extra worker back on the next round.
That sounds yucky.
So let's go from breeding huts to my number 3. I'm jumping up to number 136, and that is Quest for El Dorado by Reiner Knizia and published by Ravensburger Games. This is the one that I thought you might find interesting, Tim, because you had talked about this earlier on an episode, and I think that was what first caught my attention about it. And I looked at the game after you talked about it. No shocker to say that I do not like Reiner Knizia games generally. I find them offensively low level of theming in the games and criminally bad rules, especially when it comes to endgame scoring. But at the same time, I mean, I look at it and I say, this is a renowned, I mean, he's got like a cult following of people who love Reiner Knizia games. So clearly, I must be the one with the deficiency here. I've got to find the Reiner Knizia game that I actually enjoy. My town we played recently was actually okay. I think I was actually moving in the right.
My City.
Oh, My City. Okay, well, big difference, but that was moving in the right direction. At least there was no wacko end-game scoring rules. One might call it a theme. But this game, this actually looks like one that has a decent amount of theming. The production's fun. It's colorful. It's got this kind of Indiana Jones-esque theme. And it sounded from what you were talking about, Tim, like it might actually be a lot of fun to play. So this is one that I'd like to add to my played list. And maybe this will be the one that finally lets me see the brilliance in the Reiner Knizia model of gaming.
Well, I'm going to jump right on that bandwagon because this was my number 3 as well, Chris, sitting at 136.
Wow.
And right before the episode, Chris said, I'm going to surprise you guys. I have a Reiner Knizia on my list. And I said, I wonder if it's the same one I've got. And he said, absolutely not. But this is still a game that I want to play really badly. Ravensburger published it. And Ravensburger is notorious for making very ugly, poor production, low quality production games. And I think that's what you can expect from the original publish on this. This was then picked up, I think, by another publisher and got a remake, but only in Europe. And what I heard is I think it's finally coming to the US, the republish on it. So I don't know all the details on that, but I did look at the box art. Looks a lot nicer. The production looks a lot nicer. So I'm kind of interested in maybe when this is available in the US to try it out finally. This is a game that I think it's almost happened the last 2 years, but I think if we're going to do one of our retro episodes, this might be a game that's worth us doing an episode on at some point and giving it a shot because it's deck building, it's racing, it's adventuring. All seems like fun stuff. Everyone's going to get a little bit of joy out of it.
And all seems like stuff that you normally wouldn't associate with a Reiner Knizia.
With Reiner Knizia. Yeah, that's right.
My number 3, I'm jumping up to currently the 123 game on Board Game Geek. This is Forbidden Stars, and I suspect this one might be coming up later on somebody else's list and maybe in a different context. Designer here, Samuel Bailey, James Niffen, and Corey Kniezka. Fantasy Flight Games, published in 2015. This is an area control game that has a huge following. Lots of people still claim this is one of the best, if not the best, area control game with the way they do the combat. It's supposed to have a very interesting combat system where the way you're stacking these chips, it forms kind of a queue. First one into the area is going to be the last one played. So by the time it gets to that chip or that command or that card, I don't even know what the actual thing you put in there is, it might not even apply or might not apply the way that you hoped it would apply. So I know that that's like an interesting aspect of the game. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that are interesting about it. Based on reputation alone and my penchant for enjoying area control games, I'd like to try Forbidden Stars.
Well, Adam, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon myself. So here we have 2 double ups in a row. I mean, this is kind of hard to believe. That was also my number, was it 2? That was my number 2 also. And I'm noticing some kind of odd coincidences here as well, because, I mean, this is a Warhammer 40K game. We just a couple weeks ago played the Warhammer game Chaos in the Old World, area control, Fantasy Flight. So there's a lot of parallels happening here. I was actually looking through some of the graphics on this game and some of the cards, and one of them was the Blight of Nurgle. Nurgle was the guy that I played in Chaos in the Old World.
That's right.
It's like visiting old family. It's great. No, this game looks beautiful. I mean, I like the production on it. It looks great. It's the 4X is always a good time, always fun playing area control games. And like you said, reputation, it sounds like one you can't go wrong. I'd love to try this one. And so I will double up on your number 2. Your number 3, my number 2. Maybe this is one we'll actually do a episode on at some point here in the near future. Maybe.
Why not do more out of print Warhammer Fantasy Flight games? Sounds like a good idea.
Well, potential reprint upcoming for this one, different theme.
Yeah, interesting. And then this is not on my not want to playlist, believe it or not. This is actually a game I'd like to try just because I've heard interesting things about the combat mechanism, and I like fun and weird and interesting combat mechanisms, so I wouldn't mind trying this, but it's not on my list. My number 2 is Yokohama by Hisashi Hayashi, which is my favorite board game designer name to say. And this was printed by Tasty Minstrel Games, or TMG, in North America, which has recently gone out of business. So my understanding is this is out of print right now. I do hope another publisher picks it up. I've heard nothing but good things about it. But it's also on Board Game Arena, and this is also a game that I will be rallying to try to get played on one of our episodes and review this year. So that is Yokohama, sitting at number 121 on the BGG list.
It's going to be a royal rumble between Yokohama and Forbidden Stars. Which out-of-print game makes it into an episode first?
My number 2 game is a game by Mind Clash Games. I can't seem to hold on to Mind Clash Games in my collection. This is Trickerion, Legends of Illusion. This is currently sitting at 107 on the Board Game Geek list. Designers are Richard Amon and Victor Peter, and like I said, it's a Mind Clash Games. I had this one. I late backed it. It got here. It was in this beautiful box and had all of the stuff in there. And then I was like, man, this has all of that stuff in there. When am I going to play this thing? I don't have enough space for this right. It was like 3 or 4 years ago. I immediately was overwhelmed. So I put it up on the Geek Market and it sold within like 3 days. So off it went to a new home. It looks beautiful. There's all these different things. I've heard it's some people's favorite games. You have to do an element of pre-planning ahead of time, then try to go put on the magic show over at the theater on, like, I don't know, Thursday night or Saturday night for the big money, and then you go and do that over and over again. Lots of expansions, lots of little noodles to add here. I would love to try this one, Trickerion. I love the art here as well.
What does that name mean?
I don't know.
Does that mean something?
People that make tricks. I don't know. Like it's like a made up name revolving around tricks, because the whole idea is that you're like generating tricks for your magic show.
Okay.
Take issue with that name?
No, I don't know. It sounds like a very evocative name. I just didn't know if it had a purpose.
Oh, okay.
So that brings me to my number one game, which is number 111 on the BGG list, and it's Trajan by Stefan Feld, published by a whole bunch of publishers that I'm not going to list here. This is one that you guys had talked about, or somebody had talked about. I don't know if it was Tim or Adam, but this is a game that I've just heard come up multiple times. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm interested in this one. One is that I have not played much by Stefan Feld. In fact, other than
Castle of Burgundy.
Castles of Burgundy, the one that you and Jen always play, I think that may be the only Stefan Feld game that I've ever played. And so this one helps me check one off that list, and it also happened to be, it was one that happened to be in the 101 through 200, so that made it an easy one to pick. Production looks reasonably interesting. I kind of like the idea of the Mancala, which is a little bit of a different kind of mechanism, which will make that interesting. Honestly, doesn't seem thrilling to me in terms of the theme. I mean, it's, kind of about as bland a theme as one might get, in my opinion. But, there's enough other stuff on there, primarily related to the designer, that would make me want to add this one to the list. And so I'm curious, Tim, what are your thoughts on this one? Because I know you've played this one, and I know you have thoughts about it.
Yeah, I have played it, and it's a fine game, but it's probably my least favorite Stefan Feld game that I've played so far. I like the Mancala mechanism. I think it's really cool. I think Crusaders That Will Be Done did it they just evolved it. It's basically the same mechanism there, and I thought but it's a pretty neat mechanism. The problem with Trajan for me, one, the production is not good at all, Chris, and I think if you saw this sitting on a table, it's one of the most washed out boards, most boring shits that you will see. So nothing exciting about the production from my perspective. But beyond that, they're basically, when you're using these Mancalas, which are 6 little areas around this thing, and you're picking up tokens from one and you drop them off. And then when you get to the final one, you take the action related to all the things that you just dropped in there. If you get multiples of a color, you can get some bonuses, things like that. But each of those 6 regions represent one of the different kind of like mini games that are on the board. So there's like 6 different mini games. And, one of them is like move troops in area control. One of them is like, building tiles in orthogonal spaces. And they just felt really disconnected. There's some minor connections between them, but it never felt like I was kind of putting together a grand strategy or anything like that. It felt like I was just, what's the best Mancala space I can take right now and just do what's over in that region. One of the spaces, though, and I think this turned me off more than anything else, was a pure set collection mechanism. This thing where you're basically just drawing cards off a deck. And if you can get a match, then you take this space and you turn them in for like these little boats that are worth points. So that that was a turnoff. But I think overall, just the game felt a little dry and a little disconnected, and it was very much a point salad in a way that normally I don't mind that, but there just was no real connection between the strategy that you're going after. I played it the first time, and the two of us played, and it felt like every turn you got like 3 or 4 points. And we ended up within like 10 points. There was some end game scoring you could get, so I'm sure you could optimize on that. But it was minor, and it was like a couple specific minor goals. But it just felt like every turn, the whole game, you just moved 3 or 4 points up this point tracker. No matter what you did, you got 3 or 4 points, 4 or 5 points, 2 to 6 points. It was always like really minor increments, and everyone kind of stayed in the same space around the board. So there was no exciting moments. There were some clever little mini games in there. Like I could see some of them being reused, and I liked Stefan Feld's action selection mechanism, which is what I think he does really, really brilliantly. So it was fun to play around with. I wouldn't mind playing it again, but not one of my favorites.
So you talked me out of it. I don't want to play this one anymore. No, seriously. So, but you're clearly suggesting that if I want to dig deeper into Stefan Feld, this is not the way to do it. So what is the game that I should pick?
Wow, that's interesting. So, Castle of Burgundy is still my favorite by him, but I think you'll like Notre Dame a lot, which is a game that I will probably bring to BGHTCon with you guys. But I think several of his games you probably find a little bit more interesting. I'll bring Notre Dame, which is a lighter, kind of a lighter game and feels a little bit more interactive than some of his other ones. I think you guys will like that one a lot.
Notre Dame, aka the Rat Game.
The Rat Game.
Quoth Jen.
All right. Well, my number one on this list is sitting at 107 also, and that's Trickerion Legends of Illusions, which was on Adam's list. And I've enjoyed exploring all of Mind Clash's games so far. They haven't all been perfect hits, but they're all exciting productions and, very thematic mechanisms and just interesting. And this one's just been on my radar really since I got into the hobby and started listening to board game podcasts, and people have been talking about it. But it does feel like a heavy load to try to get into and learn and teach other people. So I've been kind of just waiting for the right opportunity. Hopefully maybe it shows up at a board game meetup or, somebody's house and I can get taught it and play it at some point. The funny thing about this is shortly after we played Anachrony, it was the first time I ever reached out to a publisher to ask for a review game. And that's, we were, 6 months into making this podcast at the time, but we played Anachrony and I loved it so much. And I was like, man, I want to try Trickerion. So I reached out to Mind Clash and I said, hey, can we get a review copy of Trickerion? And they said, here, we'll give you a review copy of Cerebro. So, so I still haven't gotten a chance to play it. We were pretty small at that time, but would like to try this game at some point. I think it'd be fun to explore. And I suspect it's a game that will not be something I expect to go back to a lot because it's just, heavy and quirky and probably hard to, to introduce new players to. But the theme of it just seems really cool.
My highest ranked most want to try between 101 and 200. And I spoiled this one to my co-hosts earlier, so we'll see how well they feign surprise when I give the big reveal here. This is Tigris and Euphrates.
Heyo.
That's about the same level of surprise they had before. This is Rainer Knizia, and it's published by Hans and Gluck back in 1997. What a great year to graduate high school. This is I don't know, some people say it's his masterpiece game, right? So it's a tile layer, kind of an area control. I sort of maybe had a chance to learn this one. I watched some people play it a little bit, and I had no clue what exactly was going on. But it's supposed to be a legendary game, supposed to be amazing. So mostly by reputation alone, I want to give this one a try and see what it's all about. And that's about all I know about it. You guys have any desire to try this one? The Tigris and Euphrates?
None. Absolutely none.
All right.
I actually have a story about this. It's not exactly Tigris and Euphrates. There's a re-implementation, I believe, Yellow and Yangtze.
Yellow and the Yangtze.
Yeah, I have played that one, and it was the first time I ever played with a group of guys playing games, and they busted this one out, and I hated this game. It was. But I smiled because it was, I didn't know these people, so I'm smiling and trying to be pleasant. And
what made it so horrible to play for you?
I think I blocked a lot of that from my memory. It's like PTSD. No, it does all of those things that strike me as a little bit, sort of standard issue. Rainer Knizia, there was this mechanism where you're surrounding buildings, which seems to be a thing he really likes to do, and connecting one city to another city by surrounding them, and then there was some weird end game. I part of this, maybe I'm confusing some of it with what's that game, Samurai? That was the one that even beat this one out in terms of my disliking it, where there was some weird end game scoring where it's like you can't score unless you have more of this than that, and you can only have, I don't even know. I'm rambling now because I don't even remember. But it was just stuff that I found highly unappealing.
So I actually have played one game of this. It was a 2-player game. A listener invited me on Board Game Arena, and I took the time to learn the rules, which didn't seem interesting at all. And I played it, and I hated it as well. I did not find it fun at all. Now, I don't know if 2-player is the right way to go about it. And I was a little confused on the rules, so that probably didn't help either. Like, I was starting to get the grasp of it by the end, but there's this weird, thing about like you're basically playing a tile every turn. And yeah, when you surround some monuments or buildings, you get some benefit. When you connect other buildings, you start a war, and the war is basically how many red tiles do you have face down. I found it completely boring, like not fun at all. But I'd like to see, I know a lot of people love it. I'd like to maybe have somebody who really loves it, and maybe it's better in a 3 or 4 player mode, teach it to me. So you know what? I don't actually, this would be on my not want to play list if I've not already played it. I did not like it. I don't really want to go back to it ever, but if I got the chance and, somebody really wanted to play it with me, I'll try it again.
I suspect I'll side with you guys after I try this one, but I guess I just want to try it just because of its reputation.
There's not a lot of games out there that, if asked, I would decline. That's one of them.
Okay. Wow.
Don't bring it to BGG, Adam.
Okay.
All right. So now we're going to go with some games that we are not excited to play. And this is not to be negative on these games. We haven't played them. We can't rank them. But it's fun to talk about what gets you excited about games and what turns you off of games before you've ever played them. And, Chris just mentioned one that may have made his list. Maybe it's on his list. Who knows? We'll see. But we're going to talk about the top 5 games that we don't want to play on the 101 to 200 list here. Let's get it started, Chris.
So my number 5 here is a bit of a cheat, and it's number 194 on the list, and it's Go by somebody a couple thousand years ago, published by nobody a couple thousand years ago, but published by probably 50 different people since then. Go is a classic game, of course. I mean, this is a game that goes way back. And it says on BGG, the earliest mention of Go is in the Analects of Confucius back in 551 BCE. And there's actually the first physical evidence found of this game was from the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE. So, I mean, this is a game that has a long storied history, and I'm kind of making a point here because obviously a game that's been around this long, everybody knows Go. Every kid has, touched this game, played this game. I haven't, so I think I can legitimately put it on my list. But I mean, this is a game that is a classic, a true classic, in the same way that chess is a classic. And chess is another game like Go that I have no interest in playing. Chess I've played, and it's the fact that it has, well, let me put it this way. It's cemented in my mind the degree to which my enjoyment of board games hinges a lot on the theme of them. And that's nothing surprising. I mean, I say that all the time, how important theme is to me in a game. But it made me think, I mean, these games like, chess, Go, I have such solid, basic, strategic mechanisms. I mean, you can't argue with that. But they don't tell a story. And one of the things that I love about playing games is that they tell a story. Even ones that are not super heavily themed, there's still a story in there, and there's something fun to look at. And maybe I'm just a big kid. Maybe I just want somebody to tell me a bedtime story, and I want something pretty to look at, some pictures. But that is me in a nutshell when it comes to gaming. And I just don't want to play something that is that plain and that abstract. Maybe I should, but I just don't.
I've tried to get into this one, Chris. I've done the little trainers and like, hey, this is what you have to do in this situation. And it's so boring to me. It's just the strict, cold, hard calculations and pattern recognition and this and that. I'm with you. I need some theme, some kind of hook, something that says, hey, what's the story I can make here? How can I make this some goofy, wacky thing? I think it's pretty when you have the polished up little circles and a beautiful wooden board and then nicely etched grid in there. But I have never been like, oh, I got to go play that right now. It's just like, oh, I don't want to play that. I want to play this other game with these other things that are fun.
Spaceships.
I've never played Go either, and I'm not really interested. But I'm not turned off quite as much as you are, Chris. But I don't think I'm going to be excited about it. A game that I am really turned off, though, is my number 5 on this list, and that's Paths of Glory. It's sitting at 199 on the BGG list, designed by Ted Racer and published by GMT Games. Now, I don't know a ton about this game, but if you look at the pictures, this is a classic like tokens and shits war game, big hex map with lots of like square cardboard tokens sitting across it, and that's not exciting. Like it doesn't look like a fun game to play. None of these war games do. If you're a fan of war games, that's great. I have no interest in playing them. I don't want to recreate this history, these terrible wars. And and I think in this case, even more than any of the other war games that were on this list, this was a representation of World War I. And the cover of the game, basically, it's Paths of Glory, and it shows this like soldier that just looks worn out sitting there, and then it's just got a bunch of names all over it, and these names, I believe, are all just like locations of famous battlefields in World War I. 37 million people died in that conflict, and I have zero interest in trying to recreate that, relive it, be a part of it. It just turns me off. So Paths of Glory is my number 5 of games I do not want to play. There were a couple other war-related games on this list that could have been there, but Paths of Glory, everything about it says stay away.
Tim, you make a great point here. Some of the GMT war games, they're just a weird section for me. I'm with you. There's nothing to me that brings like entertainment out of doing something like this. And maybe people don't play them for entertainment, which I do want to play games for entertainment. I can see this in like a history class as a semi-enjoyable way to learn about an old conflict that has a lot of relevance and it has affected the way things are today. But as a game, am I going to go spend however many hours moving little chits around in these different battles? It's not my jam.
480 minutes is what the playtime says.
Ouch. I do find it interesting, though, how games sort of fall into these niches in terms of how people go about making them. Like you notice that when you look at these kind of war games, they all have a similar feel to them, a similar look to them. And it's this really kind of, chitty, bland maps and not very, there's a look to them. The same way that there's a look to 18XX games. And I find that interesting that nobody branches out and does anything dramatically different. It's interesting.
Well, on that topic, Chris, there was an interesting little drama on Twitter this week where some guy posted, I don't know, some like gatekeeping thing about like, oh, we got to get back to some real war games, not this nonsense Undaunted. And so like Undaunted is a fairly recent game that I'm actually kind of interested in playing. There's Undaunted Normandy is actually on this list, and it almost made it to the list of games I want to play, even though it is a war game. But they changed the mechanisms and they changed the production drastically, improved it drastically. So it's not like a war game can't have a different type of production, but you're right. There does seem to be a focus of like, if I'm a war game, I got to do it this way, and present it in this way that it's going to make people feel comfortable. I guess maybe that's what it is. It's a comfort level.
Yeah, or a rut. I mean, war games, Axis and Allies. It's got a cool production.
Yeah, it's interesting. My first game on the 5 to avoid is Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. This is coming in currently at 161 ranking. This is by Sidney Engelstein, Jacob Frixelius, and Nick Little, and published by FreeX Games and Stronghold Games. I've heard enough about this one, I think, from Tim. You tried this one. It seems like a combination of Terraforming Mars and Race for the Galaxy. Terraforming Mars is a game that I already love. Race for Galaxy is a game that I think is, I don't know, it's okay. I know it gets a lot of love from a lot of people, but I've played it like a billion times on the app, and I'm still horrible at it. So I just have no desire to visit a game I do enjoy, Terraforming Mars, but in a tiny little fashion. And I think the Mars itself is kind of lessened. Its importance is lessened here in Ares Expedition. Timmy, you tell me if that's true. And that's one of my favorite parts of Terraforming Mars, is putting those tiles out there on the map and covering up these volcanoes and seeing where my city is going to be and putting gardens all around it. So that begins my list. This Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition.
Yeah, I have played this game and I don't disagree with you. I think you're right on. I didn't enjoy it very much. And it's weird because like almost every card in the game is the same as the cards in Terraforming Mars, or at least they've kept quite a few of them and they have almost the exact same cost, the same benefit, etc. But beyond the card mechanism, everything else feels like it is just a weaker game than Terraforming Mars. The map is a great example. The surface of Mars right now just represents the random ocean tiles you can flip over and get a lucky benefit when you make an ocean or whatever. And there's something about the, I don't know, the lead follow mechanism that just feels it kind of flows. It doesn't feel like you were making a, I don't know. I don't know how to answer it because it seems like it should have worked. I was excited to try it. It's very solitary. You don't really interact with anybody else at all, which again, Terraforming Mars does definitely have some points of interaction, not so heavy that I feel like people can just go after me and ruin my game, but enough where you have to pay attention to what other people are doing. And that's the fun part. That's the kind of interaction I want. And Ares Expedition takes that away. It doesn't significantly speed up the game, or at least it didn't in my plays of it. Now, I found some people just love this game and actually prefer it over Terraforming Mars, and clearly it's in the top 200 games of all time now, so it's got a lot of fans and followers, but I'm surprised by it. I kind of, after playing it, I was like, there's no way this is ever going to be a hit. I can't believe anyone's going to love this game, but it's clearly found a lot of love somewhere.
All right, well, my number 2 is one that we've already heard about tonight, and that is Village by Inka and Marcus Brand and published by Eggerspiel. This is one that I have no particular reason to dislike. I mean, it sounds, from what you were saying, Tim, like it's probably, you might have some interesting stuff going on. But, again, I feel like I'm ranting a lot tonight on production and theming, which is, nothing new. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of, hate mail about this one. But
no, I will.
Yeah, I just don't look at the hate mail. I just don't have any interest in pulling out a game called Village.
Just remember, Chris, last week you called out some of your surprises for last year were games like Agricola, where you build a farm, and La Granja, where you build a farm. So maybe building up a village is just as much fun. You never know till you try.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of the beauty of it. That just the fact that it's not something that catches my attention and I don't necessarily want to play it doesn't mean I wouldn't like it if I did play it. You never can tell. I find that I'm surprised constantly. So maybe some of these games on my top 5 or my bottom 5 list here will end up being, delightful surprises to me someday.
Yeah. And you called it your number 2. It's actually your number 4 if we're going backwards.
Number 4.
Close enough. All right, cool. Well, my number 4 is a game called Captain Sonar. This is sitting at number 185 on the list. It was designed by Roberto Fraga, Johan Lemanier, and it's published by Matago. And I don't know, this game could actually be a lot of fun. And I'm not saying it's not. Maybe I'll get the chance to play it at some point. But I suspect this game is very group dependent. It's going to be very hard to actually get a good game of it in. So I'm just not excited about it. I think most likely if I got pulled into a game, it could be a disaster. This is a submarine hunt game. It's a team game. Both teams are sitting on the opposite sides of these dividers, so you can't see what the other teams are doing. And each of the players is some role in the submarine, like a commander and a navigator and a weapons guy or whatever. And each of them have their own little jobs on the submarine. And they have to basically yell instructions at each other, but the people on the other side can hear what they're saying. So you're kind of like in this chaos of yelling instructions, trying to do stuff, but also trying to listen to what the other people are doing so you can respond to it. And apparently you're moving around on a map, and at some point you can hit the other sub. I don't exactly know how it plays. I know a lot of people have had a lot of fun with this game. I don't expect to ever get a chance to play it, especially not in optimal condition. And so the idea of, being pulled into a game when it's not optimal or with the wrong group just sounds like a big, terrible mess. I did a team building exercise this last couple of weeks ago. My company is all remote. And so we're trying to do like virtual team buildings, and we're hiring these like team building companies to put on these events. And we did one that was like a murder mystery kind of event where, you broke into little teams, like little 4-person teams. And then they sent you into these rooms and you got to interview an actor that was playing one of the characters that could have been involved in this murder. And it was really clever, situation. It was a really exciting event to be a part of, except in my group, I was the only one that got involved. I was the only one that engaged with the actors, that asked questions, that made guesses and all of that stuff. And that couldn't have been a fun experience for the other team members that were not involved. They were not doing anything at all and just listening to me engage. We did win, by the way. But it also wasn't much fun for me to feel like I had to make the fun for everybody else there. And I think that that's what this type of like big group party event game can lead to, is you just get with the wrong group, it's going to be a mess. Get with the right group, could be a blast. Who knows? I don't want to play it.
Yeah, this is a strange one. I heard about it. They're real time kind of shouting out and doing this, and it's supposed to be chaotic, and that's probably going to be a pass for me too if that opportunity ever comes up, which I don't see whenever it would. Another game I'm going to pass on is Concordia. Venus is sitting at 126 by Matt Gertz. A lot of people love this version of Concordia. I thought the original Concordia was just okay as well, so no reason for me to go revisit Concordia Venus. I don't know if I said it, but it's sitting at 126.
All right, we may be hearing about Concordia Venus again at some point. But not right now, because my number 3 don't want to play game is Azul Summer Pavilion. It's number 159 on the BGG list by Michael Kiesling, published by Next Move Games. And this one, I think Tim actually said it best last week when he was talking about, it was Queen's Garden, I think, that he was talking about. But the point that you made, Tim, I think resonated with me. And that was about taking something as simple and beautiful as Azul can be. We all play Azul. We all enjoy Azul. It's such a great game, so streamlined. Anything you do to monkey with that, to add new things to it, Queen's Garden is the one I've played. And I thought that was an absolute freaking disaster. And so I see this being probably somewhere in that same range. Maybe not as bad, but why mess with something that's already good if you can't make it better? I mean, Azul is great. I'll stick with Azul, the original.
I will say I thought Azul Summer Pavilion was still a decent game. It was still fun. It was still better than Queen's Garden. But I did, while I was playing it, mostly just want to be just playing Azul if I was going to have that on the table.
Right.
It just added a little bit extra complexity. It added some fun things, like there were bonuses when you circle around a certain thing on your player board that would give you a little bonus. That was fun. But otherwise, I think if you like Azul,
play Azul.
Azul's probably still the best. Yeah.
Summer Pavilion I bought, and it's still in the shrink. I think Steve said this was his favorite flavor of Azul, so I bought it on that strength. So I at least want to try it and see what's there. But you guys are right.
Yeah, try it. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you think of it, Adam. And maybe you and Sarah would totally love it. You're a huge Azul fan, so it'd be really cool to see how you feel like it compares. It's not a bad game. It just kind of like Queen's Garden felt like you had to do a little bit more to get anything done in the game, and that was a little bit of a drag. It felt like it was more turns just taking tiles before you actually accomplished anything, and I don't know, it just felt a little bit clunky to me. But again, not bad. I wouldn't mind playing it.
It's gonna be tough to beat OG Azul with anything.
All right, well, my number 3 on this list, a game that I don't want to play, and hopefully never will. I really don't want to play this game, and this is a Game of Thrones, the board game, 2nd edition, sitting at number 177 on this list. This was designed by Christian T. Peterson. It's the first of the Fantasy Flight games on my list. So yeah, this is about making alliances and breaking them. It's area control. Oh, and I've heard that the area control is really mean. We're basically like you can get cut off, backed in a corner, can't do anything. So it sounds like a mix of diplomacy and chaos in the old world, the worst parts of chaos in the old world to me. Adam, you'd probably love this game. You should play it, but please don't invite me.
Tim, I used to own this one.
Did you ever bust it out of the shrink?
We did bust it out of the shrink. And you know what? I don't even think I played it right. We just like put some dudes down on mop and played it. And this was a long time ago because the game has been around for a while. I don't remember much about it, but I know some people rave about it. They came out with this expansion lately, some like Dragon's Nest or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind trying it again just to see what it's about, but pretty indifferent on this one.
I toyed with putting this one on my playlist, not because any of it sounded like it actually attractive from a game perspective, but just I love the IP. It's fun pulling the cards and seeing, I know that guy and I know who this character is and I know what they did in the story and all that, but that's a poor reason to buy a game.
Next up on my list is Dominion. This game is sitting at 113 on the list. And it's designed by Donald X. Vicarino. This is one of the OG, if not the original deck building game. And I might be cheating here a little bit. I might have played this one back in, I don't know, 2008. That's when the game came out. So 2010, something like that, when this game was pretty hot. I for a while, I understand you go to anywhere, any kind of board game meetup or anything, and Dominion would be the game getting played with all these different expansions, all these, it was revolutionary at the time. What? You start with this junk deck and then you build it up, and by the end of the game, you have this pretty powerful deck if you've done it right. Well, there's been so many iterations of that done since then. Star Realms is one I go back to. Dune Imperium, if I want to do a little deck building with some fun, I don't know, battle/auction mechanisms and some worker placement. So the foundation, I get it. It comes from Dominion, but the iterations and the improvements that have been made upon it since then are going to make me steer away from this one. That's Dominion, published back in 2008.
Dominion is a game that the first time I played it, I loved it. And I loved it so much because it was right after it was published. I went into a game store to buy a game for my brother, and they recommended this. Like, this is the hot new game. We played it on Christmas when I gifted it to him, and I loved it. The deck building mechanism, the way you built that little engine was fantastic with Dominion. And I ended up buying it as one of the first hobby games. When I started getting back into this, I was like, man, I got to go back to that game, Dominion. And I got a lot of great plays out of this. Probably played it like 50 or 60 times. And it's a solid game, but the arc of it does get redundant. I think the deck building mechanism for me got drastically improved when you went to that like random card market that shifts up. Things like, Star Realms, things like Dune Imperium, just add so much more variety. With Dominion, you end up with just 10 different cards that everyone has the same pool. Everyone can buy a certain number of cards from them. And it just, each game felt like it's just about the luck of the draw. Everyone's buying the most expensive card they can buy to fit into their deck. And then if it comes up in the right order, then you win the game. So the arc of it is not fun to me. The theme of it is terrible. It's non-existent. So, there are just so many better deck builders, but I'm so happy that Dominion exists because it created this mechanism that is such a great mechanism. And it's a game I'm okay going back to, but I will say that I will usually resist it. If someone recommends this, I will say, can we play something else? And I've done that several times. So I don't blame you for not wanting to play this, but you could find some fun out of it. It's not terrible. And it's maybe worth a try at some point.
So my number 2 is one that Adam already mentioned, and that is Concordia Venus. And so here's the tagline for this game. Traders compete to build the greatest empire in the Roman Mediterranean. I think I just dozed off there for a second. I don't have much to add beyond what you already said, Adam.
Okay.
It's one in 1,000 games with that same tagline, the same map, the same concept. What makes this one special?
Chris, I got to say, you didn't join us for the episode when we reviewed that game. And it actually is a very special game mechanism wise. But the theme just takes it from being special and kind of leaves it forgettable for me. I know a lot of people love the original Concordia. I think Concordia Venus adds a team play to it, but also maybe some other just expansion content as well. And I don't blame you guys for not wanting to go visit this, but I do think Concordia is a game worth trying at some point, even if you're not interested in the theme. It's a solid thematic interactive Euro that, sorry, did I say thematic? No, it's a solid mechanically sound interactive Euro that I had some fun playing. I like a lot of fun. I think it's cool mechanisms, but also not something I need to go back to. All right. Well, my number 2 is very different from Concordia Venus, and that is Cosmic Encounter. That's sitting at number 168 on this list. This is also published by Fantasy Flight Games, or at least it has been. I don't know who published it today. So it was designed by a whole bunch of people: Bill Eberly, Jack Kittredge, Bill Norton, Peter Aloka, Kevin Wilson. I think these are all regular Fantasy Flight designers, and I'm not sure if they all designed the first version or if it was like several iterations or versions or whatever. But listen, Cosmic Encounter. It's a chaotic sci-fi game where there's shifting allegiances. It's apparently very simple, kind of dumb mechanisms. And the fun of it is that you're playing drastically different player abilities, and you have to kind of make alliances and say, oh, he's about to run away with the final point there. We got to stop him. Let's work together. All stuff I don't like. It's supposed to be unbalanced, probably dependent on player group. Yeah, I don't really have any interest in trying this game.
So these are the same designers that did Dune and kind of, use that as an early model for Dune. Do you have any interest in trying that one?
I would not mind playing Dune, and I don't know that I'd love it. I mean, I actually really enjoyed Dune, a game of conquest and,
Yeah.
and diplomacy, or whatever it's called. That is considered a lighter, lesser version of Dune. But I actually thought that was pretty fun, and I think I liked it because it was so quick and light. But I also like the Dune IP a bit, and the original Dune sounds fun. Definitely not as generic as Cosmic Encounter. So I would not mind trying Dune. I might hate that as well, but I do expect to not like Cosmic Encounter very much if I ever play it.
My next game up is Twilight Imperium 3rd edition.
So we're breaking it down by editions now, huh?
This is kind of a cop-out one. Twilight Imperium 4th edition is currently out right now, and it's in the top 10 on Board Game Geek. If anyone can think of a reason why someone who's never played any version of Twilight Imperium should play the 3rd edition before jumping into the 4th edition, I would love to hear. I heard the 4th edition improved on some of the things in the 3rd edition, but I've also heard, there's some expansions for the 3rd edition and this and that, and this thing is not available in the 4th, and it was epic in the 3rd. So I don't know much about it, but I don't see any reason why I would play TI 3rd edition instead of TI 4th edition.
I think it's really unfortunate that Board Game Geek didn't find out a way to group editions of games together in a way that they could be, kind of ranked jointly or categorized. And, I guess that there's some probably good reasons for it, but it does feel like it just clutters up this list for people who like to curate and collect things. Having to look at multiple editions of the same game in a list is just, it's offensive, to be honest. And I think there'd be some ways they could do that and make it work okay.
Mine is a similar kind of cheat as Adam's. Not exactly the same thing, but it's 120 on the BGG list, and it's Pandemic Iberia, designed by Jesus Torres Castro and Matt Leacock and published by Z-Man Games. And I don't have anything in particular against Pandemic Iberia, but I've already played Pandemic, which is a few spots down on the list from that, and I want to beat up on that game a little bit for a minute. And the reason that I disliked Pandemic, a few things. One is I played the Legacy, and I think that at the time when I was playing it, it was listed as number 1 or 2 on the all-time list. It may still be. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked because I thought the gameplay was okay. It was reasonably good. It got a little bit lackluster. It got a little bit samey after a few games. But it was the legacy aspect of the game that really killed it for me. I love legacy games. I love the way the game builds. I love the way the story develops over the course of the game, the arc of the story. And I was astonished that with all the raw material they had to do that with in Pandemic Legacy, they never did it. There was no story that I could actually. My wife and I started playing this, and I think we made it through half of the campaign, and finally just stopped because we were getting bored. There was no story that was developing. There was some stuff that was happening that changed up a little bit, but we never felt like there was anything growing, anything coming out of that. So anyway, that's a long rambling answer that has absolutely nothing to do with Pandemic Iberia, but that just left a bad taste in my mouth. I've played the original Pandemic once or twice. Again, it feels a little bit lackluster to me now, on top of the fact that I'm not a huge co-op player. But I see anything that has Pandemic in the name, and I just want to run the other way.
Yeah, I've heard this is supposed to be a pretty good version of Pandemic, and there's a lot of different versions of Pandemic. So I briefly considered putting it on my wanna play list just to try it, but I really haven't had much fun with Pandemic or Pandemic Legacy either. Yeah, I loved Pandemic when I first, Danielle, my wife and I met, and we decided, hey, let's make some friends in the city we're in. So we went to a local board game. It was like a board game meetup at our local library, and went in there, and this group of obvious gamers, your stereotypical gamers, kind of like stared at us as we walked in, like, are you guys in the wrong place? But one of them invited us over. He wasn't playing the game. He's like, hey, why don't you guys play this co-op game with me? We learned Pandemic, and this was back in like 2007 or 2008. It was like right after it got published, and we had fun with it. We ended up winning on the first play, so that was exciting. So Danielle and I bought it, and we played it a bit together. over the next few years. And, it was a fun intro to the hobby, and it's not a terrible game, but I'm not a fan of co-op either. So anyway, long rambling story that you didn't need to hear about why I don't disagree with you.
Sorry, on all these pandemic games, is it something where you're doing your thing and at the end of every round or the beginning of every round, you just flip an event over, right? And boom, some catastrophic fire happens and you just have to go put it out.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. There's a deck of location cards, and basically when you flip location cards over, you put like tokens on them that represent the spreading virus. But once there's a certain amount of tokens on a card, then it blows up and gets worse. And there's an element of like when you, after the cards after a thing blows up, then you take all the cards that were already discarded and you shuffle those and put them back on the deck. So it's more likely to create an outbreak after that. So it's this escalating tension, but it's pretty luck driven. Of course there are actions you can take, but you may not even be able to win the game. You have to depend on the deck beating you regardless of how well you play in a co-op game or even a solo game, because you're not playing against a real thinking human. And so, that can definitely be a letdown, where sometimes the game is like, wow, that was so easy, never could have lost to it. And sometimes like 3 turns in, there's no way we can win this game. So I don't know. A lot of people love a lot of people love co-op games, and we just aren't big fans. So this probably just isn't a good game for us. All right. Well, my number 1 on this list is sitting at number 127, and that's Age of Steam by Martin Wallace and John Borer. Now, I've liked every single Martin Wallace game I've played, and I might very well like this. If you told me that I was going to love Brass Birmingham, after you told me the theme on it, I would have said probably not, but I love that game. So this could be an awesome game, but this is an earlier game. It looks like an 18xx type of production and board, kind of bland, not very exciting. And here's the description on Board Game Geek. Challenges that await you. Can you finance both the most extensive track network and the most powerful locomotives? Which routes will give the best returns on their costs? Can you beat the opposition to the most lucrative shipments? Will you make enough money to pay your aggressive creditors? That does not sound fun to me. That sounds like work, and I don't want to do work when I'm playing board games. So I hope to skip on Age of Steam.
Sounds spicy.
But maybe I'd be surprised if someone made me play it.
Yeah, I've tried this 1 or 2 times, and it was okay. There's tons of different maps. I think that's part of the appeal. I think, you can play in the Midwest, or you can play on the East Coast, or you can play in New York, or you play in Australia, or you play on the moon. A lot like 18xx. They have different versions for everybody across the world and on the moon. I guess there's a whole school, hey, do you like Age of Industry better, or Age of Steam better, or 18xx? And I don't know. I think one time we should try an 18xx game, just so you guys get a dose of that and see how much it hurts you. But yeah, I tried this and it was just, it was okay.
I'd love to try an 18xx just to have the experience. I don't know if I'd like it, but I want to try it.
If there were any 18xx games this high on the list, in the top 200s, it definitely would have made my list.
My number 1 game that I want to avoid, something about it was just off-putting to me, is Eldritch Horror. And I think this is the game that you were talking about, Tim, but maybe I have that wrong. This is designed by Corey Konieczka and Nikki Valens, released in 2013 by Fantasy Flight. And it's got the whole Cthulhu mythos as a theme, which isn't super attractive to me. I know Chris is really into that. I'm just a little over investigators and insanity and Cthulhu popping up. How many times can you do it, and how many different ways? I had fun with Cthulhu Death May Die. I think that's going to be the end of my Cthulhu enjoyment, is playing that game with you guys. But I don't want to play Eldritch Horror. I don't want any elders coming anywhere near any of my board game tables. So that's my number 1 most want to avoid game in the numbers 101 through 200 on Board Game.
You ask, how long can they do this? How many games can they put out? Well, here it is, 30 years later, and we're still doing trade routes in the Mediterranean in pre-industrial Europe. So there's your answer.
Yeah, this is not the game I had talked about. I played Arkham Horror, the card game, which I can completely understand why you would have gotten confused by those 2 games. Same theme. But there's something that feels different to me about them. I don't know a lot about Eldritch Horror. I do know the playtime is 120 to 240 minutes. I think it's kind of scenario based. What I get the sense of is that it's a longer, more luck based, less exciting Cthulhu Death May Die. That's the feel that I get, but I don't know for sure if that's the case. So I am also not interested at all in playing Eldritch Horror. Could care less, as well as Arkham Horror, as well as, I don't know, I think there's several other Cthulhu-based games by Fantasy Flight. But somehow Arkham Horror, the card game, did really hit for me, and I like that one a lot.
That's the one that you enjoy. Okay.
All right, cool. Well, that is all of the games that we really want to play and did not want to play on the top 101 to 200 games on Board Game Geek. If you like this episode, then let us know, because maybe we'll continue on down the list at some point. But it was fun to revisit and kind of take a look at what's sitting at this point of the list and think about what we'd like to check out. So that'll wrap up this episode. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at BG_hot takes, or find our Facebook group on Facebook. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.